And this is the concept, but all of the book in context. So in sentence 1, page 1, chapter 1, I talked about Earth Overshoot Day. And what Earth Overshoot Day is, it's the day in which on the calendar that we've exceeded our consumption of resources has exceeded the Earth's ability to regenerate those resources. So as you can see in 1970, we were pretty much living in balance, which means that as we were consuming Earth's resources, water, timber, habitats, food from fish and other naturally occurring organisms, they could regenerate. Our consumption was in balance with their ability to regenerate. If you go all the way over to the right, you see in 2019, Earth Overshoot Day actually occurred in July, late July. And that means that from the end of July to the end of the year, for roughly 4 or 5 months, we were living on borrowed time. I mean, that's the equivalent to living on a year's paycheck in the first 7 months of the year, and then living on your savings for the rest of the year. Eventually, you're going to deplete your savings. What we saw in 2020 might be viewed as good news. You see that Earth Overshoot Day actually occurred later in 2020. It didn't occur until late August. Why was that? Well, that's because of the massive economic slowdown that occurred during COVID. And that's the one other constant you see in this trend line, which is in every point in time where there's a global economic slowdown, Earth Overshoot Day backs off a little bit. And that's a pretty cruel irony, in that the only time we start to slow down our consumption of resources is frankly when human suffering, human anxiety is increased. And so this just highlights the fact that what I believe is the greatest tragedy of the day, which is we value our present self rather than our future self, which means that we care more about how we are living in this moment. We care more about how we as individuals are living in this moment than anything that comes after today or anyone that comes after today. And to be clear, a lot of this consumption is confined to a very, very small number of people. The fact of the matter is there's close to 800 million people around the world living in what's termed by the United Nations as extreme poverty, less than in US dollars, $1.90 a day. So something is not working, right? I mean, if the markets were working, we wouldn't be depleting our resources at this accelerating rate and leaving so many people so far behind. And I define a sustainable market as having 5 traits, and these cut across all the markets for sustainable goods and services that I was able to find. And the first is that they're inclusive, that they create value for everyone. They don't necessarily create winners and losers. And it's kind of this concept of a rising tide lifts all boats. The second is that they're responsible. As I said, they respect the human, the natural, the financial, and the social capital. The third trait is that they're transparent. If you want to market a product as being sustainable, you have to be very transparent in why that product is in fact sustainable. Otherwise, you could either call it greenwashing or simply that you're never going to get anyone to actually believe that your product is actually sustainable. These, as I alluded to in my very first set of comments, these markets are very, very connected across all the actors in society. They work best when those actors are working in collaboration rather than against each other or in isolation, which we too often see in these markets. And then finally, and this builds on the transparency, they're trustworthy. Because of the transparency, they allow the public to trust that the products, the goods, the services being created and sold in the market actually do what they claim to do, which is to operate in a much more sustainable fashion, create much more long-term value for society, and create much broader based benefits for society. So as Philip alluded to, my book, Transformative Markets, laid out 10 recommendations to foster greater development for markets for sustainable products. And here on the next slide, I touch on a few of them. So the first one is to embrace the influence of networks. The premise is that these markets are actually networks of actors across those four sectors, and that the more that we understand, appreciate, and value the ability of these networks to bring together different kinds of actors with different skill sets, different roles, the more we will foster the mindset needed to create the collaboration needed to not only create these markets, but also scale these markets in any kind of setting. And so we really have to embrace in every market the move to a circular economy. And I think, again, if I could, write the book again, I would weave circularity much more clearly into a lot of the definitions of how these markets should work and how the actors in the markets should be judged, and how they should really work together to create markets.